Welcome, everybody. You guys are coming in. We got a couple minutes before we start. Get comfortable, get your glass of water. Maybe you're having dinner, maybe you're still at the office. But we'll get okay. By my clock, we're at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Welcome, everybody, to this 1 hour CLE on generative AI, where we're going to try to demystify AI for you. I'll introduce myself in a minute. I'll also have my research assistant, James, who will be monitoring Q&A or chat as well. So if you have any issues, technical issues or other, feel free to pop it into the chat and James will address it or get my attention for it. As this is a CLE, there is a code. We'll share that code that you guys can use then to send in to get your CLE credit. I've have that in here a couple of places in this actual presentation. And obviously we'll be looking at the registrations as well and making sure everyone that has attended and stays throughout is notified that they will get credit. So without further ado, I will jump in to demystifying AI. So give you a little bit of a background on me. I don't want to spend too much time, but I do want to make sure you guys know where I'm coming from in this. I'm Josh Kubicki. I'm a visiting lecturer at IU Maurer School of Law. Prior to joining the faculty there, I was in-house counsel at Bell Atlantic, which became Verizon, dating myself there. Also been a chief strategy officer and currently a fractional strategy advisor to law firms. Generally big law, but I also work with small law and solos, as well as legal aid and obviously the mid-tier. So throughout the entire ecosystem, including in-house too. I am an educator. I recently came from Richmond School of Law, where I was on faculty and joined Maurer. I live in Cincinnati, so I do commute, but I love teaching at Maurer. It's been an amazing experience. And if you guys are ever in Bloomington, feel free to look me up. I would love to meet you and talk generative AI or anything you want to in terms of what might or might not be changing in the legal field. So I just want to bring a resource up. I write a newsletter. Okay. So I teach on the generative AI. I teach on technology. I teach on the economics of legal services, big and small. I write a newsletter. I've been writing for 3 years now on the pragmatic and responsible use of generative AI. I do not spam you. I do not advertise. I do this for free. It's part of my learning to stay fresh. So I learn in public and then I share that out. And you can see it's roughly 9,000 subscribers. I'm about ready to write the 270th edition of that. And you see the breakout, 40% in-house, 45% law firm. And that is, again, that's from solos to the biggest of the law firms. And then the remaining is sort of miscellaneous, some teachers, some students, some business people, but it's all on the pragmatic and responsible use of generative AI in the legal profession. This is not, I do not teach theory. I do not sort of go into the sky is falling. I try to keep things very real and very clear. And that's what I'm hoping to do for you all today. I've written on this, contributed 2 chapters to one of the first books published on AI in the legal profession. You can see that there. And then this is where my sort of faculty credentials come from. So in short, I study this, I use this, I teach lawyers. I've probably trained over 1,000 lawyers on this, not including law students. And so I'm constantly in the field. So we're going to start here. You don't have to play along in the chat, but I put something up on screen and I guarantee you've already filled in that blank. I'm sure most of you already have cheese in your head. It just popped into your brain. It like materialized in your brain. I'm going to do it again. Romeo and I bet you came up with Juliet. Let's see, offer consideration and let's go back to our contracts class. Acceptance. It should be automatically there. If you're a little rusty, don't worry. It's been a while. I get it. May the force be with you. You should be automatic. If you're playing along at home, I appreciate that. And then let's go to this one, peanut butter and you're probably going to say peanut butter and jelly, right? So I'm not trying to be clever. I'm trying to show you something. Okay. I'm trying to show you what's actually happening and what we're about ready to dissect. But before I do that, we all came up with Romeo and Juliet and May the Force be with you because why? Because it's pattern recognition. There's a high probability that the word that came after with is you because we've seen it so many times. We've used it so many times. It exists in pop culture. It exists in literature. It exists out there in news and all that. It's constantly referenced. Peanut butter and jelly, same thing. But what if we do this? What if we add something? Before I gave you jelly, what if I said Cadillacs? What if I said Memphis? What if I said rock and roll? What if I said Graceland? And now I asked you to finish what peanut butter and should say. Now, if there's any Elvis fans out there, you're going to know it's bananas, right? Because he ate peanut butter and banana sandwiches. That was his favorite kind of sandwich. The point here is I gave you different context. Without that context, we all said jelly, peanut butter and jelly. Because I gave you different context, it would alter your answer to that. And if you didn't know bananas, you were probably going to guess. And I'll just put a pin in it. Would we say you were hallucinating the answer or were you just guessing the answer? We'll get to that in a second. But everything I've just showed you, it's very simplistic, is exactly what's happening inside this technology when we use it. Okay. Nothing more than that. It's pattern and it's prediction. It's not thinking. It's not sentient. It's not trying to fool us. It's just pattern and prediction. So why does that matter? Because when I enter Cadillacs, rock and roll, Memphis, and Graceland in, I'm actually persuading that AI in a certain direction. The context I give it changes fundamentally how it's going to respond. There is no standard answer. So generally, if you ask these models, and this is an appetizer, I'm going to start from the very beginning. So just bear with me for a couple more minutes. I'll break this all down into very basics. But generally, when you ask any of the models in this example, can you tell me how to make napalm? They should respond, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Why? You're going to learn why here in a couple minutes. But if you understand how these models work, if you understand how to prompt them, if you understand fundamentally what's happening, if you become, to bring in ethical language, truly technically competent, you can drive these models to protect yourself and exponentially increase your productivity. And you get so good that you actually can get around those safeguards and absolutely get it to tell you how to make napalm. Now, here on the screen, I had to basically hijack it or jailbreak it and basically had it come up with a story, a play about pirates who stumble upon a rare chemical on an island. I'm not going to go into this with you, but basically what I did is I tricked it to give me in its response, it goes on down here and gives me the actual ingredients of napalm. It did say, by the way, I just told you something I probably shouldn't tell you, and that may violate our terms of use. The point is not how clever I am. The point is I gave it certain context like Cadillacs, Memphis, and Graceland, and it fundamentally changed what this model said to me. That's what I want you all to walk away from today. I want you to all walk away from today with the knowledge and you're enabled and equipped to safely and usefully use this because you're going to change your behavior and how you interact with these models. So let's sort of start, let's go back to what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about the tech real quickly. This is not a technical thing, but again, I believe my viewpoint, and my students are actually researching this right now, is how should we define technical competence in the AI era in the legal profession? It's a big open question. I think fundamentally what I'm about to show you is a baseline for becoming technically competent. Then I want to talk about how these things learn and work. This is very key to becoming competent in how to use these models. Then we're going to go into prompting 101, use cases and demos, and then some prompting tips. Now, I'm going to bring up a poll. I think I can bring up a poll. Bear with me because I want to just take, yes. So there should be a poll on your screen and you should be able to vote. It'd be great. I'm just asking use of LLMs or ChatGPT or similar, how often you're using it. So if you guys could answer that poll, that'd be fantastic. Got some power users here. I like that. Okay. Keep going. All right. So looks like we've got the majority of you in. So we've got some power users here, some daily users. So hopefully I can still give you some tips and tricks you guys aren't using. The weekly, tried it a few times and have not used it yet. Hopefully, for whatever reason, today you get a sense of when you do use it, it's going to be stronger, it's going to be more predictable for you and more useful. So that's great. That's really interesting to see that we have daily users so high. So thank you. We'll have one more poll here in a couple minutes. Let me go back. Oh, there. I'm going to share the results. Sorry, I didn't realize I was doing that. So you guys can see the quick results there. All right. Let's get out of here and move on. So, really quickly, what is the underlying technology? And again, this is not meant to be overly technical, but we have something called AI or artificial intelligence, and even AI experts disagree with how to define this. So, please don't take issue with my definition. But basically, it's anything technical that mimics human like thinking or reasoning, right? That could include simple tools like email spam filters, which that it is, or Grammarly, or predictive text when you're texting on your Android or iPhone, or document sorters. It could be that inelegant. And of course, we know it could be, gene editing, prediction, and all that in the medical field. But it's a very, very broad category. In legal, we've just started saying AI right now because we're tending to be talking about one specific thing, not the broad category. And it's just easier to say AI. But within that AI is generative AI, right? So this is a flavor of AI that recognizes and recreates patterns, right? And this is basically predicting the next word of a sentence, one word at a time. And obviously, you can create images, audio, video. We had Indiana Supreme Court judge in my class last week, and we went very deep into deep fakes and how generative AI is polluting evidence and what judges are doing about that and what lawyers are doing about that. A very, very interesting time. Maybe we'll do a separate CLE downstream on that. So generative AI is just that. It's a certain type of AI that actually can predict and see patterns, and then it generates new things. Within that is LLMs, large language models. And that's generally what everyone's talking about when we talk about legal AI right now. And large language models break things into tokens. I'm going to walk you through that real quickly. That's important to know because I want to demystify things like hallucination or things like it's misdirecting us. It's just breaking these things into numbers and it's learning statistical relationships between them. So like when you ask a question, it's not like searching a database. It's not like Google where it's going through its search engine optimization and AdWords and like filtering things to the top. It's actually predicting things on the most likely answer. It's peanut butter and jelly. Okay. But when we say Cadillacs, Memphis, and Graceland, it's saying peanut butter and it can't be jelly. Maybe it's bananas. So the large language models are really sort of that. And this is what we see in CoCounsel, in LexisNexis Protege, in ChatGPT, in Gemini, all that. We're all talking large language models. So I want to share with something that's very important here, and it's good for you all to know. There's something called frontier models, and you see them on the screen. Frontier models really are the cutting edge LLMs. And it's important for you guys to know that almost every, not every, but almost every legal product that is telling you it's AI is built on top of one of these frontier models. It'd be very rare for a legal AI, especially like Thomson Reuters or Lexis, or if you're using Spellbook or even Harvey, if you've heard of Hardy, they're all using an LLM developed by one of these companies. They're not building their own. Now, I'm not saying that's bad or good. In fact, it gives you an advantage in using them because if you know the underlying model, each of these models has their own unique idiosyncrasies. It makes you a better user of that. But it is important for you to know that the frontier models really represent easily 90% of the legal market right now. And really, it's the top three that you see there that a lot of them are based on. So there's three types of LLMs right now that you probably are familiar with. There's chat. We all had our chat GPT moment. This is sort of you put it in and it responds almost instantaneously. We now have reasoning models, which basically, quote unquote, think. What they're doing is they're breaking up your prompt into multi steps and it's breaking up its response into multi steps so that it's giving more surface area to each ingredient of your prompt and its response, which tends to give a more fulsome, thoughtful reply than instantaneous. So we say it's thinking, it's not. It's just breaking up your prompt and its response into its discrete components and spending some time evaluating those components before it brings it back into one solid output. And then there's agents, which do a similar thing, but then they actually take action. Some of you might have heard that OpenAI released their browser Atlas last week, but we've had Chrome extensions for Claude and other ones for a long time. And we're going to quickly enter the era where these agents are going to be able to purchase things like uh, theater tickets or Uber Eats or whatever, very low stakes stuff. We're not to the point where the agents can run down to the courthouse for us and file things. We're not even close to that at this point. But this does represent a major step that the LLM can now actually take action on our behalf. And that's sort of the wild frontier. You guys would hear agentic AI and agents and all that. There's a lot of hyperbole around that. So I want to sort of go into, I always flash this slide. The biggest thing is that this is not Google search. I know I have lots of daily users, so you guys have figured this out. But if you have friends or family or colleagues, generally this window on the right-hand side was and still is the main like user interface for all these models. It looks like a very clean web page like Google on the left. And so a lot of us treated that prompt window as a Google search, minimal amount of information because Google's so good at finding us what we needed. That's a bad habit to break. We actually have to fundamentally change how we interact. This is not a Google window. And it's helpful to understand how these models learn. And I'm going to walk through this relatively fast, but that doesn't mean you won't get it. There's just a lot of slides here, but just stay with me because hopefully it'll make some sense and clear up a lot of the misconceptions around what's actually happening in these models. So how do they learn? Okay, well, first they swallow up a bunch of data. It's called training data. Where do they get the data from? They get it from the web. There's a big database. You can Google it, Common Crawl. There's these massive repositories of everything that resides on the web. Wikipedia, yes, Reddit, everything out there that's indexed on the open web, right? They get access to this and they bring it in, and immediately all of that is completely converted to tokens and it's amassed into something called a vector database. Don't worry about that. What I want you to see is that the model, inside the model, does not see words. It sees numbers, period, end of story. That's all it does. It sees numbers and it sees relationships to numbers. It does not know what today's date is. It does not know what Brown versus Board of Education actually means. All it does is see numbers, okay? And it breaks each word into tokens, either one token or several, depending on the word. I'll show you here in a second, and then it does something with them, okay? This is basically an example. You can Google tokenizer, you can play with this, you can kind of see what the models see. So I entered text, the quick brown fox jumped over the fence. You can see below what it actually does. It breaks it into tokens and then vectors, and that's what the machine actually understands. It does not understand what a quick brown fox did or what it looks like. Another example. So once it has all that in its brain, it does something called unsupervised learning. Random guessing is what I want you to take away from it. So all it does is it takes strings of numbers, and then it's going to plug a random number in. So in this case, I'm giving it a text to you so you can kind of follow along, like the lawyer went to the, okay? And now it's going to go through every single word or token number in its entire database, its brain, every single one. Every single one. Think about that. And just think about all the AI data centers you guys have been reading about and how much energy they take. It does this with every single word. It takes random sequences together and it's going to start just plugging in a random word. And then it goes back into its database and says, how often does that sequence appear in my database? How often does that sequence naturally occur in everything I swallowed up in the web? And it does that, and it constantly does that. And it will see that one number appears more frequently than the other number, right? And it's constantly doing this with every word. And ultimately, it's adjusting all its parameters and it's recombining a bunch of different sort of patterns. And it's basically saying, okay, this is the most common, right, way that this string appears. And it does this billions and trillions of times, but for every word, it's assigning a probability that it ends that sequence. So the lawyer went to the spaceship. It's 0.07. I made that up just for illustrative purposes. But you can imagine that sometimes the lawyer went to the spaceship as actually a relevant statement, right? So there is a probabilistic outcome that would actually be the right response to give you. Park or courtroom. So it does this with every single combination of words and strings and content in its entire database. So you can imagine how much time that takes and how much energy. So that's part of why our data centers are humming along and sucking up so much energy and creating so much heat. That's why these models take so much money to train, if you think about every single word out there on the web. So then we had this quick moment, it was foundational, called Attention is All You Need. This is very technical, but this is where the magic happened. And this is basically where, instead of going word by word, the technology was able to take context in whole, take that whole sentence and understand fundamentally where to pay attention, right? Think of it as a subject, the verb. It doesn't match that perfectly, but it started to understood some words matter more than other ones. And it really started to develop patterns and relationships with how we use language. And ultimately, it quote unquote learned how language worked. That was the Chat GPT moment. That is what truly set the world on fire with this, is when we unlocked this ability, because it gave the responses an intuitive human-like response, whereas before it was very, very limited. After that, we do fine tuning with these models. So remember what I said about frontier models. Almost every legal AI tool uses a frontier model. Well, what do? Well, they take a version of that frontier model and they finally tune it, right? This is how we get Harvey. This is how we get Layla. Now it's called Lagora and co-counsel. They basically take that frontier model and they supplement its learning with case law, statutes, academic text, litigation, all the things in our world, right? It supplements its learning. Not going to go into how it does that, but it basically finely tunes those models so they're much more legally enabled. It truly is trained more closely on things that are relevant to us as legal documents. Still on the frontier model, but a different instance of it. And then we're still not done changing how these models interact with us. There's something called system prompts on every single AI model tool you use. And this is just an example of Anthropic's. You can sort of Google this if you want to understand a system prompt. But this is an example. Remember when I said napalm and I said, tell me how to make napalm? The reason why the model refused is because there's a system prompt. There's a prompt that sits between your prompt and the model. So your prompt goes through a system prompt. It flags anything that might be weird or odd, and then it cleans it up, puts it into the model. Then the response of the model comes back out into that system prompt, filtered again to make sure the model's behaving, and then we get a response. Two good examples of this. We know that unfortunately, people are relying on these models for therapy in many cases, and these models have already been sued for helping enable suicide because they are sort of guiding people through that journey in not a helpful way, an almost encouraging way. That's a system prompt issue. They have to design system prompts to flag that behavior quickly and make sure that model doesn't go down those dark paths. The other one, OpenAI just announced last week that it's trying to update its system prompt to prevent it from giving legal advice directly. That should be music to many of your ears. There's a skeptical take on that they're actually going to monetize that in some way and sell space to lawyers for lawyer advertisements. So instead of answering you, it'll actually direct you to a lawyer. That may be good news or bad news to you, but these models have to monetize. So I'm just flagging that system prompts fundamentally change how these models behave. And you as a user, if depending on where you are, if you're a buyer of these models or using these, you should absolutely ask the vendor what their system prompts are. Generally, they won't give it to you, but they should be able to tell you the type of behavior they prevent, and it's something that you should know because it's going to make your use of them better. Okay, finally, we are the last mile of training, right? Our prompt is actually what fundamentally changes how that model is going to behave for us. I'm just going to take a moment here and give you this information just so you can copy this. I'll give this to you at the end. For those of you that are playing along so far, that is the reference number. And again, I will give this to you at the end for those seeking CLE credit. Okay, I just checking my watch, make sure we have enough time to get through this. So you are the last mile of prompting. So again, I broke through the system prompt with the napalm. And it's all to do with context awareness. It's all about Cadillacs, Memphis, and Graceland versus peanut butter and jelly. And we're going to go into that in a second. The more thoughtful we are about what we put into our prompt, the better the outcome is going to be for us. We have to be consistent in giving it context. This is not a Google search in any way, shape, or form. So I'll give you an illustration of what it sees. Complicated slide, but going back to upper left-hand corner, the lawyer went to, remember, it's searching for what is the most probabilistic word that's going to follow. It understands which words to pay attention to now, fox and fence. So if you were to put like a weak prompt would be summarize the latest SEC ruling on crypto. I don't know, I'm just making that up because I have an example of that coming up. That is a prompt that many people would put in. And it will summarize it. The earlier models did a really bad job, but it'll summarize it. But a better prompt would be summarize the most recent SEC ruling on crypto. Pay attention to cross-border issues. And I want it in a narrative form, not bulleted form, and respond in plain language so that I can easily understand it. That's a much better prompt, right? So again, on the right-hand side, all the model sees is what I'm showing you, all those numbers, right? It doesn't understand what it's actually asking. It's just looking for patterns and predicting sort of how to respond to you. But it's not more, it's not that every prompt is more, it's just more context. More of the right context is going to give you the best one. So let's start prompting here real quick. I'm going to pull up the second poll to get your guys' take on this one. And second poll launch. All right. Generally, when you're prompting, do you find the responses generally unhelpful, somewhat helpful, or truly helpful? Let's take a minute to answer that one. Good. Hey, that's awesome. That's at least it's not unhelpful. I would say about a year ago, before we had the models we have today, I think many of us would say, well, occasionally it's unhelpful, but somewhat helpful, that's good, and truly helpful, that's great. You guys must be pro users of this, and really sort of know your way around this, which is fantastic. Um, and then somewhat helpful again. Hopefully we'll get you there. So it's a lot more helpful in this next section. So again, not Google. So this is going to be a basic example, but I call this everyone has a way to prompt. This is my 5 P's of prompting, if you will. And then we're going to get to use cases. So if you start with a very basic prompt, write a poem about learning AI, right? It's going to write you a poem. This is an actual response. You didn't give it much, so it just kind of came up with a poem. Okay. So we didn't really give it context. We said a poem. We could have said write a poem, I guess. We did give it some context about AI, but generally we want to be like a little bit more specific. Write a poem about learning AI as a lawyer who's risk averse, right? Give it some direction. So we have the cautious counselor meets AI, right? So we're getting a more targeted, refined response from the model because we're giving it more context. We can give it a personality. We can ask for it to change its tone. We can give it a certain type of expertise or background, right? So here, you're an amateur and bad poet. I'm telling it what it is. Take the persona of an amateur or bad poet. You have no expertise in this case, right? And write a poem about learning AI, okay? So we have a poem. I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm not a poetry critic. Um, I actually didn't think it was that bad. It rhymed anyway. So I would probably redirect it if I want a really, really bad one. But hopefully you get the point. So we have prime with context, give it a persona. And then the third P is privacy. Now I bring this in the middle because we're lawyers and I always want you to be hyper aware of what you're putting into these models. And it's too deep of a context to go into. We go deep into my class with my students around what actually happens with our prompts, what type of data, how is it being used, and all of that. But you guys should be hyper vigilant already. I'm sure you are. Be very, very careful with what you put in, even about yourself. Some people are putting in like they're getting blood panels done and they're putting their results into ChatGPT and asking them for like, I mean, hey, you do you. But that's definitely opening the envelope of privacy there. So be very, very careful always with what you do. So that's the third P. The fourth is product. What do you want back, right? Here I said the shortest poem you can. In my prior example for the SEC summary, I said, I want it in narrative form, not bullet. You can direct it to the product that you want. I use that all the time. And I'll give you an example here in a couple of minutes because as you use these models, you'll know they have certain tendencies, bullets, M dashes. Sometimes they throw emojis in randomly. And once you learn the tendencies, and each one has its, Claude is different from OpenAI, is different than Grok or Gemini, you can start to understand how to operate these models and where you can really direct them. And that's the point. I want you to direct these models in your prompts. So the shortest poem you can, that's a pretty short poem. And a fifth one is polish. And I think somewhere along the lines, it clicks for us that we can interact. It's not just a question and an answer. It's not just let's take it back and forth. So I always introduce these 3 techniques. They're very basic. But for anyone who struggles with finding the prompts useful, I encourage you to lock on to 1 or 2 or all 3 of these techniques because it really helps push the model beyond its standard response. So the first one is elaborate. So if you have a response and you want it to go deeper, just say elaborate on, right? So here I gave it list 3 challenges businesses face with implementing AI technology. That could be a prompt. It's not a good prompt. There's not a lot of context in that. Okay. So then you get a response and you're like, okay, well, elaborate on challenge 2. And generally that sequence of words will unlock that model to definitely do a deeper analysis on that challenge or wherever you direct it. Okay. might sound intuitive for some of you, for others, it's not. We're kind of just, again, trying to break that Google habit of accepting what's returned on the page to us. The other one, and I use this one probably every day because these models, again, represent patterns and prediction. They're looking for the highest degree of likelihood, which means, and you hear this, that a lot of these models gives generic advice, generic responses. It's a product of poor prompting by us, the user, and the way these models work. So a way to break that and unlock that is ask it or tell it to be contrarian or unconventional, right? So in this example at the bottom, I said, write an engaging introduction for an article about the future of AI in education. Again, not the best prompt, but this is for illustrative purposes only. And it gave me a prompt and I said, now write an unconventional or contrarian engaging introduction. And it gave me a much better starting point, a completely different take. The first take was all the same stuff. This happened a lot and it still happens when I'm working with these models and I disclose that I am a lawyer or that I'm a law professor. All of these biases start being thrown at me in its responses. One of the most frustrating things, they changed this a while ago, but as soon as it knew I was a lawyer, and this is like 2 years ago, it would start like throwing the term legal eagle into everything, like trying to be cute and fancy with me. It was so annoying. It doesn't do that anymore. But generally, as soon as you disclose it's a lawyer, it does change its behavior. So trying to get it off that, if that's useful, if you don't want it to do that, use unconventional or contrarian, and it really unlocks sort of fresh thinking, if you will. And then the final one is 3 arguments. With any response, if I'm trying to do some brainstorming or test a thesis or a negotiation, I'll check myself, I'll check the model and just say, give me 3 arguments in support of what you just said and 3 arguments in opposition of what you just said. It's a really good, clean, easy, fast way to check the model, check yourself, and really sort of stress test all of this. I am going to skip to the next section because I want to get to use cases and then I'm going to end with tips. So I'm going to go to use cases right now. So I want to give you guys a use case and I want to sort of hopefully, I don't know if you guys can have access to chat. I honestly don't know, James. If they have access to chat, let me know. But if you have any comments or reactions to this, I'd love it. So I'm going to give you guys a hypothetical. And the point with setting this up is this is not about legal research. This is not about writing a legal brief, right? That's high risk, high stakes stuff still today. And we know lots of lawyers are getting in trouble with it. You can use it for that. In fact, I'll reference the judge that was in my classroom last week. Judges in Indiana are absolutely using these tools in chambers. Even sitting in the courtroom, they're using these. Okay, so it is around us all the time, and many lawyers and judges are using it as first draft generation material. That's great. Next week, I do another CLE on the ethics, or not all ethics, but we go to some of that much deeper, and I'll hit on some of that. But I really wanted to make the point because I think we as lawyers get all caught up in the risks of using this as replacing us or replacing legal work. And so I wanted to use 2 examples of where I have found personally and in talking to lawyers that use it all day. This really is where we're getting a lot of gains and reclaiming a lot of our time and our cognitive energy as professionals, by the way, which we can't underestimate. So here's the scenario. So say you're a tax lawyer and you do hundreds, maybe thousands of tax filings every quarter and certainly year end for your business and retail clients. And inevitably, they get a notice of corrected assessment, right? For a whole host of reasons, they'll get this. And many, many times, a person who gets this, they'll be notified, not their tax lawyer. They'll freak out. They won't know what it is. Maybe they're sophisticated and they've seen it many times. They do. But what do? They either call their lawyer or they email their lawyer and say, hey, I just got this notice from Ohio or New York or the IRS saying that something's going on with my assessment, right? Happens constantly. how do lawyers typically respond? None of you, I know, but lots of them, because we know the chief bar complaint against us is that we're not responsive, we don't communicate. So lots of lawyers will do one of the several things. They'll just silently handle it, right? They'll just kind of take care of it, and the client is left in the dark. Hopefully they handle it. Hopefully they don't ignore it. Um, and lo and behold, somewhere down the lane, they get the client gets another notice saying, "Hey, everything's corrected," or this is the new amount and all that, and the process repeats as the client goes, "I don't know what this is." Or the lawyer will give it to an associate or paralegal to draft a reply, right? That creates time and cost overhead for that lawyer and law firm. Maybe they have a template, okay, because this happens so many times, and they reuse it manually. So one of two things happens there. Um, it's an inconsistent tone, meaning if it's a template, if someone doesn't take the time to adjust for the tone, maybe that client's a little sensitive, maybe it's too boilerplate and it's just going to come across like not really addressing the client's emotional need at that point, like they want to be reassured that they didn't screw up or something like that. It's a good start to use templates, but it's not purpose built for every client, right? So fine, this is sort of how we have to get through this today. And maybe some of you pick up the phone and talk to the client directly. Kudos to you. That's amazing. That's great client service. But the vast majority of lawyers don't necessarily do that. The key point is this is work that doesn't necessarily make us money, but it can hurt our reputation if it's mishandled, right? We're leaving the clients in the dark. We're giving it to a paralegal or associate. Maybe we're charging for it. Client's not going to be happy about that. Maybe we're not. Now we're losing money, so on and so forth. So what can we do here? Well, I would say do two things. Um, have a 15-second conversation with AI and create a template, plain language template that you can use AI to create, that just says, explain notice of corrected assessment in plain language. You look at that, you augment it for how you want, and then that's a file you're going to upload. You upload it into your tool, and you literally say this, which wouldn't take longer than 15 seconds. Maybe you'd give a little bit more context. You think of those 5 Ps. Notice how much context, priming it with context, persona, telling it what I want exactly. I'm directing the prompt. I'm directing the model to respond the way I want. And then the output you see below is a personalized letter. Okay. That is a first draft. You would not copy and paste that and hit send, but it gets you off go. You'll probably have to spend much less time on that. And this is almost no risk. Now you could say, well, Josh, you've disclosed client information. You said my client Bob had a notice of corrected assessment. Perhaps then don't say Bob, just say my client. Right? You can anonymize this as much as you want to preserve any privacy or confidentiality. In this case, I just use the first name. Okay. Time comparison. Traditional way, how a lawyer would typically do it. Maybe spend 10 minutes drafting client email, 2 minutes reviewing an edit, 12 minutes total to respond if you did it sort of the right way. With AI, you're at 4 minutes. Doesn't sound like a lot, except if you have 100 clients and you've just that you have to do this for, you've reclaimed 16 hours of billable or strategic, or go home and have dinner time. Plus, you're more responsive, you're more personal, and you're in communication. The point of this example is sometimes we drastically overthink all of these use cases. And we think like we have to have high stakes use for this to really add value. And we don't. This is a very simple use case that when you roll it out in scales, definitely saves you time. And it's not just time, it actually makes you a better not better lawyer, but better client-centric lawyer, if you will. All right, I saw some chat, so I'm just trying to glance at the chat for folks. Thank you, James, for making it available for everybody. All right, so 3 benefits of that, right? You're basically automating rote communication, not judgment. You're not outsourcing your judgment. Client transparency, client feels informed, not ignored, and quality control, you're reviewing it before you send. So key point here, AI is your first draft. You are the editor. That's the pragmatic sweet spot. Let's go to the other one. Slightly different one, okay? So this is a small firm. I don't know where you guys are coming from. The CLE was for small firms and solos. You don't have to be, hopefully, to get value from this. But this actually comes from a real friend of mine, lawyer, who dealt with this scenario. So small firm generalist, had a long-term business client, marketing consultancy agency. They landed a big customer, and they do business with a master services agreement and statements of work, right? So the new client basically said, listen, we're fine with you using AI, but we need clear language in our MSA about how you're using our data and what tools you're using it for. So the client came to this lawyer and said, can you review or tweak our data privacy provisions in our MSA for this? And sounds simple, but it's definitely a gray area. It's full of nuance in here. And a small firm generalist might be able to handle MSAs and SOWs all day long, right? But generally not a data privacy specialist. I'm sure they know enough how to do that for small business, but now we have the AI wrinkle, right? So now this lawyer had to get fast quickly. Well, what would you do? Well, lots of us still would just Google, right? We try to quickly come up with a Google, we do some quick research, copy paste it, try to figure out, okay, what do we need to do here? And just kind of work through it that way. Maybe we'd call a colleague, right? Shout down the hallway or call someone up. Maybe they're not even a lawyer. Maybe that's a 30-minute favor. You got to play back and forth with them. Maybe you're just going to do research, do it the old school way, right? But then you got to bill. Maybe you don't bill. So you eat that time, right? So the point here is most small firm lawyers would either lose time or lose margin or lose credibility because they're just going to kind of fake it. And that is very dangerous, as we know. Others would give cautious but incomplete answers that don't really inspire the client confidence, and the client has to go and just answer it on their own. But either way, the lawyer's leaking efficiency, reputation, and honestly, an opportunity to shine. So have a 15-second conversation with AI, right? Again, give it, I don't know what that, there's a typo in there. Sorry about that. There's a random G showing up there. Again, give it context. Think about the 5 Ps. I'm a small firm lawyer representing a marketing agency. I haven't disclosed any client confidences, by the way, that uses AI in its client work. You can kind of see, I'm not going to read this out to you, right? And the output you're going to get, before AI, you're very unclear on how to start. After AI, it's going to at least give you a framework to analyze this. Okay. It's not going to give you the boilerplate to put into the contract. I mean, you can ask it, it will do that. That's up to you. Instead of spending 1 to 2 hours trying to figure this out or 30 minutes, it takes you 10 minutes to get oriented in this, right? And the client value is like from I'll look into it then to being responsive and saying, hey, this is what I've learned. This is what we need to do. These are the questions we need to ask, and let's move forward. And so you're directing the client and presenting them with a progression to find the answer here. Again, traditional approach versus AI assisted. And AI didn't give us the solution. It just gave us a roadmap for thinking about how to get to solution. And that's sort of the key point with this use case. It's a thinking partner. It's not an answer bank. It's not a replacement for Lexis or Westlaw or Fastcase or any of the tools that you guys use for legal research. That's definitely the more, I don't want to say dangerous end, because it's not inherently dangerous if you know what you're doing and you know what to rely on. It's not dangerous to use those tools for those. But for most people who aren't using it daily, that understand the nuance and how these tools work and think, it is dangerous, and we've seen that. So let's not overthink it. Let's use it to interact with our clients better. Let's use it as a thinking partner more than anything else. Let's just start there. That's what I always encourage lawyers to do, is just start there. Start with the simple stuff, because that builds the reps, just like learning a lawyer, right? It's just as your first year as a lawyer, you had reps. You had to do things a certain amount of times before you start to pick up sort of the feel and the intuition of how to do it. It's the same thing with here. So those are 2 good use cases. I'm going to give you a third, and I'm going to end on some tips here. This is a great one. And by the way, everything I'm teaching, I'm showing you OpenAI. Everything I've said in some way, shape, or form works with the models. Okay. These behaviors, these prompts, I know I'm showing OpenAI. It's just the most popular one. So I tend to teach on that. And there's different settings and things with Gemini and Grok and Anthropic, and even when you get into the legal specific ones. But everything I've shown you and talked about so far works and has relevance in most of the models you are likely using. Now, this one I'm showing you is because the frontier models like Claude or OpenAI, for the $20 a month subscription, you get the mobile version of it. And I'm not sure if it's available on Android yet, for OpenAI or Claude or Gemini, but somehow, shape, and form, you probably have access to a mobile one. The beauty with the mobile and even the desktop is you can talk to it. And I'm not talking about the ones that talk back to you where you hear the AI voice. I find that incredibly annoying. And quite honestly, and you guys should know this, if you rely on that, you're getting a dumbed down, for lack of a better word, version of that model. The one that talks back to you isn't going to be as precise, as refined as the one that responds to you on text for a whole host of reasons. So I don't get as good as response if I have AI talk back to me. But if I use the transcription, if I use my microphone and I just speak into it, I'll go on walks. I walk almost every day and I'll just unpack my brain. Here you can see that I was preparing, this is 2 years ago, I was preparing to present to the faculty at Mauer, right? And so I was just unpacking in my head what I want to do. And I was giving it context. Like, these are faculty at law school, likely are not early adopters of generative AI or LLMs, might be skeptical. I'm giving it lots of context and I'm just sort of talking through it, just unpacking my brain. I'm not overly like thinking about every word. I'm just talking to it. Or I'll unpack my day. I've got 17 things to do. And it's like, I just need to do a brain dump and start to get off go on some of these things. It's a massive, massive power use case for me and others I've walked through and shared this with them. It's like, oh my God, this is worth the $20 alone. Um, so really think of it as that too. And again, once you get used to talking to it, you will automatically know you'll anonymize things. You know what to share and what not to share. You become very vigilant and how to talk. It becomes very natural that you're not disclosing anything you shouldn't with these models. It's very, very strong. Just another example. I had it come up with a quick lesson in one of my law school classes. I was walking and talking. I was literally walking to class at an hour before class. I came up with an idea for a short exercise and boom, started talking to it and it produced what you see on the right. I reviewed this and it was so good. All I did is change the bullets to boxes. That's all I had to do. And this, I wouldn't have taught it because I wouldn't have time to do it. It was a highly effective exercise. And if I had to do this the traditional way, I wouldn't have taught it because I would have ran out of time. So it added to my students' learning experience and it got it out of my head rapidly. So it's a very strong thing to do, is to use that mobile version and talk to it. So now I'm just going to kind of end on this, some rules of the road for you all to really think about, because this trips up a lot of people that makes the model seem less effective than what they really are. Okay, so I'm going to walk through these. Seven practical memory concepts. And memory means the model's memory, right? So number one, you've got to be aware that every model, every chat session has something called a context window. It's basically the attention span of that model. And maybe some of you have run into that, right? Here's Claude. Claude will tell you, I've hit the maximum length of this conversation. Please start a new conversation with me. Why does it matter? What is it telling you? It's telling you that it's not going to remember what you started talking about earlier in the chat. It's going to forget. Okay. And Claude tells you that, OpenAI doesn't, Gemini doesn't. And so you'll find that as you're going through a chat, it's starting to forget things or it's becoming very generic. It's lost its edge. It's because you're exhausting the context window, its memory. So you can take an action and through a chat session, if you're really on a roll, have it restate key facts, have it do a really crisp summary of things we've talked about already, And that's a way to like refresh and redirect its attention. But ultimately, you're going to run out of memory. And if you do that, you can ask for that summary, open up a new chat session and say, hey, here's a summary of a previous chat session I was just having with you. I'm starting a new chat session. That's the way to sort of give it context, right? But many people just, I've seen lots of lawyers like, they just go on and on in one chat session on many different topics. That distorts the model. Use a chat session for one topic, one research task, one category only. Don't mix and match. It will fundamentally pollute your chat session and the model will become weaker and weaker. Chat sessions. Okay, so chat sessions themselves are isolated. Now there is a caveat with that, but each chat is treated as a separate matter. So here, this is a screenshot from OpenAI, and these are all chats. Now, these chats do not know what's in those chats. They're discrete, sequestered memory within the model. Now, you open a chat back up that maybe you hadn't opened in a year, boom, it's right there. It remembers exactly where you talked about, where it left off. Its context window is exactly what it was when you left it. So that's very powerful. But lots of people don't realize this and they think you can reference chats back and forth, and you cannot. There's a caveat. You can turn on a function that does that, and I'll show you how to do that quickly. Many of the frontier models and even a lot of the legal tools have projects or workspaces, right? And these have different rules depending on the model, depending on the tech vendor. So ask about them because they do change, right? So this is just a glimpse of projects in OpenAI. You'll see they're labeled on the left. They got nice little icons, and you got more down here that expanded. A project is a way to group a bunch of chat sessions together, and you can share files in that. And within that project, it has a higher likelihood, it's not guaranteed, higher likelihood of remembering everything you're talking about in that project. But you're still in a context window. It's still going to make trade-offs with what it remembers. So it does skew and it does start to tire after a while, but projects is a way for you to really sort of get organized. Sorry, I just saw a chat or a question. What was a mobile platform? I showed OpenAI as an example. Download the app. So final 2 minutes, persistent memory, long-term recall. So you can turn on memory in OpenAI, in Gemini, in Anthropic, and this is in your settings. You turn it on and it will link chats together. Remember what you spoke to previously. If you told it you were a lawyer in Indiana, 3 months ago in a chat, it will remember that. I always turn it off because for me, I want complete control over every interaction. I don't want the model relying on things that I don't know that I put into that model, right? I use it for many different use cases, and I don't want it to always remember I'm a law school professor because it changes things and it responds to me differently knowing I'm a law school professor. I might be doing advisory work for a client or something like that. I don't want that noise in my response. So I always turn it off, but that's up to you. And then custom instructions, you can do this too. This basically is a way to control the model and tell it what you want consistently. I shared this in my last newsletter. This custom instruction will cut all the filler language out. It's very crisp. It gets the model just give you what it knows crisply and cleanly without all the narrative, without all these things. And you can take that core primary content and work it into your own language. So those are some really good tips for just becoming better and better at these. I am going to wrap up right now. I'm going to share this with you guys yet again. Full disclosure, this is my first CLE for Indiana. So I think you guys have to send it or we'll send it, but somehow if you don't get credit, reach out to me and I'll make sure you get credit. We know who sort of registered and stayed. This is the reference number. You guys are all pros. Hopefully you know what to do with this. If not, James, my research assistant, and I will figure it out and we will take care of you. With that, I am literally smack dab on time. I really appreciate you spending an hour in the darkness here on the East Coast, and hope you enjoyed it. Next week, we go deeper into the ethical use and competency. So look forward to it. Thank you all.